So, big question for everybody, since I know everyone's going on about the whole Don't Say Gay bill, which was in Florida, and it really kind of turns out that it may have actually been an anti-grooming bill instead. I actually listened to the whole bill in part when somebody read it off at one point, and it was amusing because they're apparently trumping up as kind of this anti-gay bill where they say, you know, you're not allowed to discuss sexuality orientations with young kids in schools. So I heard somebody read off the bill, and it was interesting to note that nowhere in any part of the bill it even said the word gay in it. Like homosexual, gay orientation, LGBT, none of that was even listed. And it went on even to explicitly state that no ideology was to be taught to kids in a particular age group for a specific age range designated by the grade they were in, specifically K through 3. So it's like all the 4 to 5 year olds clear through to the 9 to 10 year olds. Don't talk to them about sex. Don't talk to them about orientation. Don't discuss any of the shit that is not relevant to them because they're prepubescent. They don't need to know about any of that stuff. But here we are in today's modern, morals, upstanding society where apparently everything has to be political. And they're trying to effectively reach out to these younger kids to kind of enforce this ideology on them. And parents are now starting to become aware and push back. This bill is explicitly aimed at those practices, and I should say at large, to just kind of put a quick summary to it here. Basically, the school board is not allowed to discuss any of those topics without parental permission, and it explicitly denies the school board from talking about those ideologies or talks to anybody, you know, who is the 3rd grade or lower. In other words, these kids don't need to hear about it. If these kids want to hear about it, they should go talk to the parents. Teachers are not responsible for it. And in the higher end of the grade challenges, you know, you're talking 4th and 5th grade. You know, I had my own sex education when I was in the 5th grade, and it was kind of, again, to understand, if I remember correctly, it was to understand the changes in the body and what I would be going through as I got older. And granted, they kind of sprung this out of nowhere late into the 5th grade. We didn't even know it was coming. It was kind of like a last-minute thing in the later end of the year. But it was more informative. It's like, these are the changes your body may be going through, and this is to understand it. It was kind of one of those things. And that was it. No, we didn't even discuss it, like I said, until like the very late part of the elementary year. And even then, it was a very structured, very rigid thing, likely had been cleared through a whole bunch of things there. And for all I know, they could have told my parents, and my parents were like, yeah, sure, whatever. But that's what this bill was explicitly meant to do. That if the school board wanted to talk about this stuff, or create any sort of health check, they had to go to the parents first and say, hey, are we cleared to teach your kid this stuff? And the parents absolutely had ultimate authority to say, yeah, sure, whatever, or no, absolutely not. You will send my child home early that day, or, you know, something to that degree. That's ultimately what the bill, it necessarily is, and it's been kind of kicking up a storm. Case in point, this article was passed around and I found it here. Let me go ahead and pull it up real quick for y'all. It's from the week here. So, it's titled here, Why Are Republicans So Concerned About Grooming? Well, I already have a devil's advocate argument here, but let's see what they say, because ultimately there is kind of a broader issue here. Suddenly, the American right is fairly exploding with accusations of sexual grooming against its political opponents. Christina Pushaw, the spokesperson for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, used the term last month to defend the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. If you're against the anti-grooming bill, she tweeted, you were probably a groomer, or at least you don't denounce the grooming of 4 to 8-year-old children. Rod Dreher, who writes The American Conservative, has in recent days lobbed the term at Pervy Disney for its belated opposition to the new laws and labeled Democrats the party of child mutilators and kidnappers. And mega outlet American Greatness on Monday printed a broadside against groomer fragility. It's not a very nice word to be sure, wrote the American Greatness author, but the right must decide. Do we prefer to play nice with perverts who are very sexually interested in our children, or do we prefer to stand up for the innocence of childhood against the societal forces that seek to mutilate little kids for political gain? It's hard to know how much of this is hysteria and how much is ugly McCarthyist politics, mostly the latter. In its normal usage, groomer suggests a sexual predator, carefully prepping their prey for the assault. But Dreher, who has long been obsessively shrill about the rise of gay and trans identities in American culture, says that's not really what he means. I think it's coming to have a somewhat broader meaning. An adult who wants to separate children from a normative sexual and gender identity to inspire confusion in them, and to turn them against the parents and all the normative traditions and institutions in society, he wrote last week. It may not specifically be to groom them for sexual activity, but it is certainly to groom them to take on the sexual gender identity at odds with the norm. So let's consider that for a moment. What effectively is going on here, just kind of at this moment here, is that they're basically calling out the people who are in support of these ideologues as grooming, and in a way it kind of is, considering they go on about sexuality and everything else. The article does go on further here. And that's a very disturbing trend if you think about it. Plus, at the ends there, the whole thing about the bill was to defend the parents' rights to what their child can be taught in schools. This is the big thing. We're supposed to be encouraging parents to take more responsibility for their kids, not less. Not raise the kids on social media, the internet, and everything else. That's what's been going on, and why a lot of these kids are, so troubled, is because they're being left to being raised by the internet. And as somebody who grew up in that particular age, trust me, letting the internet raise your kid, not exactly ideal. You want to be involved with your kid from that formative age, at least until, kind of their teens. Then they're going to kind of start to grow independent and test the line, and they're going to see where your boundaries are. That's just how humans grow. Let's go ahead and continue on with this article here. So maybe that's what he means. Most Americans will hear the term, though, and understand it to mean something more violent than encouraging kids to question their sexuality and the church. That misunderstanding is almost certainly intended. Accusations of pedophilia, child rape are old hat in today's Republican Party. In 2020, Trump shared a tweet falsely accusing Biden of being a pedophile. Karl Rove reportedly inspired similar whispering campaign during an Alabama judicial campaign back in the 1990s. Sometimes the ugliness is overt, as during the QAnon conspiracy theorizing that in part led to the January 6th insurrection. And sometimes it's a bit more subtle, with Republicans accusing Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson of being lenient on child predators. Those accusations and rumors were untrue, unfair, and ugly, and just another part of performative politics. The point isn't to protect children, it's to weaponize concerns about the safety and the service of political conservative power. Alright, so they have kind of a point here in regards to conservatives kind of weaponizing the concern of child safety for their own gain. Counterpoint and devil's advocate. Why do they even have to have a stance on this platform in the first place? It's ultimately what their opposition is preaching. Basically, letting all kids as early as goddamn 4 to 5 years old question their sexuality. Kids that age shouldn't even have that. What is wrong with you if you honestly think that you need to have a discussion that young with somebody who is not your biological child or adoptive? Okay, you're not the parent or guardian. Why do you need to be having a discussion with this child about this? It's not even going to make sense to them at that age. Really is not. That's what baffles me about this. It's a really easy counterpoint. Why is this even a concern? They're saying it's because the Republicans are playing up the term and to effectively, drum up fear-mongering. Why is it even a platform issue? It should be kind of like a universal thing, Both sides do this. Both sides weaponize your kids in their own best interest. I will fully admit that the conservative side that I support is weaponizing your kids. At the same time, I urge you, beg you, to reflect on your own position and consider who it is you're actually also supporting. The fact that people have chosen to rally against this is very incredibly disturbing, and any parent should rightly be very concerned, which is a far cry today than we have back then, because today we don't have parents. We have abortionists, people who will, at the first sign of pregnancy, rush to the doctor and get whatever the hell, whatever you want to call it at this point in time. Dear God, do I really need to make another pro-life argument? No, not going to get into that territory. That's a whole other video. But they're effectively going to go in and pull out the zygote, the fetus, the baby, whatever you want to call it at that particular point. The point where the two cell clusters merge to become a single organism. I don't care. Whatever you want to call it. That gets terminated outright. So you've got a bunch of people who don't want to be parents, preach about not being parents, brag about the number of terminations they've had, basically trying to raise your kids for you. That doesn't concern you. What concerns you is this whole don't say gay thing when the entire bill is basically saying what a school can and cannot teach kids in a specific age range. And if they can, they have to have the consent of the parent. If I were a parent, and gods, that was one of my dreams growing up too, I wanted to be a father. But that's just not going to happen in this day and age, just because of what all is going on. It's not that I don't want to bring a kid into the world. I think I could make a particularly good go at it, if nothing more. It's kind of a crapshoot, but I think I would be a decent one. But even then just because of, the laws surrounding it, the way women are acting, the way society is right now, and the way I keep getting beaten down, it's not in the cards for me, and it's basically a pipe dream. It's upsetting. And I made a whole video on that, so I'm not going to get more into that here. But still, even if you want to be a parent or you are a parent, and that's the big one here, this should have you outraged. And the people that are kind of preaching against this, trying to say, oh, it's just the right trying to make a political power play. Yes, you have a point, but look at your own side and why they have this stance in the first place. By God, that does not disturb you in the slightest. Are you even fucking human at this point? Jesus Christ.